Welcome to W Report. This is an analytical transformation of an interview. Only the key answers, rephrased questions, and our commentary. Scott Ritter, you're a former U.S. Marine Corps intelligence officer and UN weapons inspector. You recently wrote an article about the sharp exchange between Trump and the Russian leadership. What exactly was said, including the nuclear threats, and how dangerous is this escalation in rhetoric?
I'm not a diplomat. I'm a former Marine, and I'm not known for being much of a wordsmith, pretty direct speaker. But when I was with the United Nations, a very experienced Russian diplomat kept pressing on me the importance of words. He said, words matter. When you use a word, the language, the meaning, it's all important. And that seems to be reflective of all Russians, not just him. That when the Russians use words, they matter. The language matters. And I bring that up because we this exchange that took place between Donald Trump and Dmitry Medvedev. Sometimes people, they have a tendency to say, it's just the internet. It's just social media and posting. There's the term S posting, S being a bad word, so I won't use it. But so don't read too much into it, except that one of the participants is a former Russian president, and words matter. President Trump posted on his Truth Social media platform a post that was sort of critical of both Russia and India and mocking. Basically, I think Trump is coming face to face with the reality that the threats that he's put on against Russia are having zero impact. Even Lindsey Graham, who has been one of Trump's dominant advisors when it comes to how to put pressure on Russia, acknowledges that Russia is pretty much sanction proof. That Russia has made itself immune to the impact of U.S. sanctions. And the president has come to a similar conclusion. He said these may not work against Russia. But the idea was to do secondary sanctions against the people who bought Russian oil. Well, China's just not playing that game. India, has always been sort of sitting on the fence, but it doesn't appear that India is going to 100% buy in. There is some talk that India is looking at additional sources, but the Indians, aren't giving the United States the result that they wanted, and so President Trump has mocked the dead economies of both Russia and India, indicating that if they continue to operate in this fashion, that they won't have business with the United States, and the United States will conspire to kill their economies. And he then went on to caution Dmitry Medvedev, who's been critical of Trump's threats over the last couple days, weeks, to say, you're entering very dangerous grounds. Well, what does that mean, dangerous grounds? I think here we get an insight into, how much the Russians follow Donald Trump and follow the United States and follow our policy formulations. We have a president who has openly embraced the concept of regime change, decapitation strikes through military action in Iran. He has talked about how, he could have targeted the Iranian president, the Iranian supreme leader. He praised early on the Israeli efforts to achieve this decapitation. And the Israelis, in designing their Iranian attack, made reference to, the Nasrallah effect, meaning their assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, combined with this pager attack against Hezbollah intermediate leadership. The combined effect was to collapse Hezbollah's political sustainability and led to Hezbollah withdrawing from the conflict against Israel. Netanyahu, in talking about the Iranian action, made reference to the Nasrallah effect, saying that we're doing the same thing early on. Now, what does this have to do with the President of the United States? We're looking at the reality. There's a couple things the American people need to come to, grips with. One, that the notion that this president was seeking the bettering of relations with Russia is an absolute fallacy. The president has never been seeking better relations with Russia. The president has been seeking relations defined by American supremacy over Russia, American superiority over Russia. That what the president wants isn't to treat Russia as an equal, but to treat Russia as subservient. That the betterment of relations is contingent upon Russia yielding to American demands about Ukraine, yielding to American economic imperatives. We've seen the president lash out against BRICS and the supposed de-dollarization taking place in BRICS. Um, this is all indicative of the fact that what the president wants is a Russia that recognizes American supremacy. And that's not the Russia he's confronted with. Russia that he's confronted with is the exact opposite. A Russia that is presenting America with Russian supremacy, especially when it comes to the issue of Ukraine. That Russia will do whatever it wants in Ukraine. There's nothing the Americans can do to stop them. Um, I think you're also looking at the fact that Russia is largely immune to American economic pressures and that the American military isn't up to the task of dealing with the Russians. This is something that I think has come crashing home to Trump. And so what happens is I believe that Trump becomes very vulnerable to arguments that say, we don't have to match the Russians conventionally. We have nuclear supremacy, and that if needed, we could just take the Russian leadership out, collapse the Russian intermediate leadership, and lead to the collapse of Russia as a whole. The Nasrallah effect applied to Russia writ large. Um, This dates back to thinking that existed in the 1980s during the presidency of Ronald Reagan, where, talk was given about launching a decapitation strike using Trident missiles launched from Ohio-class submarines, Pershing II missiles based out of West Germany, B-52s armed with air-launched cruise missiles. The combined impact of all these would be that within 12 to 15 minutes of launch, Russian leadership would be eliminated, and the majority of Russia's strategic ability to hit the United States would be eliminated. Um, the belief then is that the Russians would back down, confronted with, the real likelihood of their total destruction if they continue the conflict. Fortunately, that never happened. One of the reasons why that didn't happen is that Russia put in play a concept known as the dead hand or the perimeter system. A lot of people think that it's fake. It's not fake. I know it's not fake because when I was a weapons inspector in Votkinsk, we came face to face with the modified SS-25s that were used as part of the perimeter system. Instead of having warheads on top, they would have a sophisticated communications module. They would broadcast the launch codes so that if the Russian leadership was taken out, all of Russia's surviving nuclear weapons will be launched against the United States automatically. That's why it's called the dead hand, meaning, you may have killed them, but the dead hand is going to launch the missiles. Medvedev alluded to the dead hand. He said, "What are you talking about? Dangerous grounds. Are you threatening us?" And he said, well, you might want to take a look at The Walking Dead. That's a TV series about, sort of a zombie apocalyptic world where everything, society has been largely destroyed and people are running around survivors. Um, and he mentioned the dead hand. Now, he said the dead hand, which doesn't exist because Russia hasn't officially acknowledged the existence of the dead hand, but it does exist. Words matter. Dmitry Medvedev made this statement for a reason. He's letting the president know that the fantasy that exists in his head, the fantasies that's being sold by his advisors, is just that, a fantasy. And the consequences of seeking to act on this fantasy by threatening Russia will be apocalyptic in nature.
Scott Ritter, former U.S. Marine and UN weapons inspector, emphasizes how seriously Russia treats public statements. In his view, the recent exchange between Donald Trump and Dmitry Medvedev isn't just online rhetoric. It reflects deeper strategic messaging. Trump's remarks about economic pressure were met with a strong cultural and historical response from Medvedev, referencing systems meant to deter extreme actions. According to Ritter, this shows that traditional pressure tactics are no longer effective, and communication itself has become a geopolitical tool. In short, when leaders speak, their words carry weight, and in today's world, that can shape real outcomes. Draw your own conclusions. We'll be watching how the situation unfolds. Thanks for watching. This was W Report.